Tell you what, we finally got some warm weather. It has been hot the last few days. It is hot today. We're supposed to get some storms rolling through this evening, and I think overnight and throughout tomorrow. So we are going to see some unstable weather here overnight and in tomorrow. Tomorrow is the Blackfish Classic on Lake Minnetonka. Super excited to be a part of that. A bunch of teams are out pre-fishing all weekend. They've been out doing it. We'll see what happens on Lake Minnetonka tomorrow. They have 5 bass to weigh in. Biggest 5 get $15,000. Weigh-in starts in the afternoon around 2:30. Hop onto the Blackfish Gear Facebook page and watch that weigh-in live as we weigh these fish. Should be a whole lot of fun. Now, going back to this last week, earlier in the week, it was really nice, really comfortable. I think I had a couple days in the mornings. I started with sweatshirts and sweatpants, believe it or not. I woke up one day, I think it was like 58. One day it was like 65. It felt good, low humidity. And then bam, we get smacked in the face on Friday with a whole bunch of wind out of the south. I was up on East and West Rush Lake. As we know, when you get a strong 20-mile-an-hour south wind, that lake gets interesting, and it did. We zigged and zagged, caught some fish. And then yesterday on Saturday, in the 90s. Today on Sunday, in the 90s. So it only makes sense we're going to get some kind of weather system behind all this warm weather. Not a weatherman, thankfully, because it seems like it's always wrong. But the fishing this week, spent a lot of time on Lake Minnetonka, spent some time, like I said, on East and West Rush, spent some time on some West Metro stuff. So we found a variance in water type, but we found a consistency on what these fish want. Predominantly targeted bass and walleyes and pike. We did not catch many walleyes. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We're going to focus heavily on bass on this video. We did do very well on some panfish because we had to switch gears a bit with these weather conditions, with all the wind, the clientele. We did shift gears and chase bluegills, crappies, perch, big perch, and had a blast doing that. I'll walk through some of those situations too. Water temperatures, upper 70s. We saw even 80 on surface temp as the days progressed here the last few days. So it is like bath water. If you're out there swimming, enjoying lake life like many people are, there are jet skiers and water skiers and wakeboarders and people just wading in the water. It's a great time of year to do that. You probably had a blast this weekend if you were out on the water enjoying it. Now, if you were an angler, you probably had a whole lot of fun from sunrise until about 10 a.m. And then from about 10 a.m. on, the hoods were up, the water was being chugged, the sweat was coming down, and you actually found yourself finding spots in the wind to be comfortable. And we had a lot of wind, and we have a lot of wind. I'm looking at the trees right now, whipping around out there outside the garage. So we had some consistent wind from 10 to 20 the last few days, gust to 25. But like I'm saying, it felt kind of nice. You know, I hate talking about a lot of wind. It usually is my nemesis, but when it's 95 degrees out and sunny, a little bit of wind goes a long way. So how do we catch our fish? They wanted heavy baits. They wanted them plummeting to the bottom, and they wanted a jigworm, and they wanted a Ned rig. And by a jigworm, we're going to talk about a straight jigworm, a Senko or a Kamita on the back end, or a TRD, a large TRD, a Z-Man. These are all options that I'm sure you might have out there already. This one here that you're going to see on this setup is an all-terrain Mighty Head. That's a whole Mr. Twister Kamita on there, a whole bait. I fished the whole bait because I wanted to plummet down to the bottom. These fish are on the bottom. I've put a handful of fish in the live well this last week because we've had some of these Pro-Am charity tournament type events. Did one with the Rapid Marine, did one with the Partners Group. And I'll tell you what, when the day's done, there's claws and shrapnel and pieces of crayfish in my live well, which tells me these bass are feeding on the bottom. That's what they want. They're on the bottom. And if you're looking at these fish with forward-facing sonar, you're not seeing them all over the water column. They are down there on the bottom, chasing things around. So I want a presentation. This is a heavier jigworm. This isn't a twister tail. This is plummeting to the bottom. And depending on the type of plastic you're using, they'll float. So they'll sit up like this on the bottom. You also have a Ned rig. So the heavy Ned rig, this is a 1/5 ounce, 1/6 ounce. I'm using a 1/4 ounce all-terrain head, Mighty Head, and I'm pitching this out to where the fish are, and I'm letting it plummet down to the bottom, and I'm just kind of hopping it. Again, we've talked about our sequence, our cadence. I'm using the rod to move the bait, and I'm using the reel to pick up the slack. The rod, rod tip up to move the bait, the reel to pick up the slack. I'm not reeling it in and hopping and dancing. I had clients and people in the boat that fished that way and they did not catch them. You pitch it out there, you feed some line, you let that bait go straight to the bottom, you click your bail to engage the retrieve, and you work it with the rod tip and pick up the slack. This is how slow we're fishing. You're working it with the rod tip and you pick up the slack. And hook sets are free. You feel a bump, you feel a little pressure from a weed, you kind of snap it through. We had many bites the last few days where people thought they were weeds and they were not. They were fish. That was just kind of their mood level. Yesterday, Saturday, we only got these fish to bite darn near dead sticking. I could see the fish. I could physically see this fish on electronics. I'm like, they are here. Those are not bait fish. Those are not bluegills. Those are the bass we want to catch. And you'd cast past them and you'd work the bait past them and they would kind of follow it and then kind of just simmer off. Where if you pitched it by them and you let it sit there and you just kind of barely danced it, they would come over and they'd go down and they'd pick it up. So that was the technique that worked for us. We're using spinning rods. We're using 6.5 to 7.5 foot medium light or medium action spinning rods. These are custom built from Thorne Brothers. This is a custom built stealth rod. I love that new blank, works really well. This is a 7'3" medium action. We put some 20 or 15 pound braided line on that to a 8 or 10 pound fluorocarbon leader, and then you tie your jig. I use the high vis line. You've probably seen that before. I use the 832 or I use the high vis Power Pro. I just like that because I can see it. I am using a fluorocarbon leader, anything from 3 to 7 feet, depending on the day. I did joke with some clients yesterday. By the time we were done on one spot, we had broken off a bunch from pike that I had about this much of a fluorocarbon leader left. So that's just battle mode. But that's the setup we're using, and that works great for both the jig worm and the Ned rig. We did throw some swim baits, struggled to get fish on those, caught some pike doing that. All of our big bites, every one of our big bites came on jig worm, Ned rig. Broken record, beating a dead horse. I totally get it, but that's what they want. And I like that because as a fishing guide, that's a fairly easy way to fish. You're fan casting, you're making contact with the bottom, and you're just slowly working it through. And hook sets are free. You feel like you got a weed, kind of pop it through. And oftentimes, if it's just a weed, which oftentimes it is, that might entice that bass to come over and grab the bait. So you're kind of working it. Oh, was that a fish? You reel down. Is it moving? Is it moving? Nope. Oh, that's a weed. Let it drop right back down and continue with your cadence. And that's how we're getting bit. It's a bass. It's a fishy bass bite. Anywhere from 8 to 15 feet seemed to be very good. That's where our big fish came. We caught plenty of fish and 15 to 24 as well. But I'm telling you, our bigger bites on all 4 bodies of water we fished this week were in 8 to 15 feet of water. That is where the bigger fish were sitting. I'm just guessing. I'm not an expert in all of this. That's where those crayfish are. That's where the forage is. As you move out deeper, you have the more aggressive, the more nomadic fish that are 1 and 2 and 2.5 pounds, and they're chasing bait and bluegills, and they're a little more aggressive, and it might be a little more fun to catch those fish. But your bigger bites were in 8 to 15 feet, at least for us on all 4 bodies of water. That was the consistent big fish bite for sure. Our biggest fish this whole week was a 5.37, caught in about 10 feet on our Ned. We caught some 4-pound class fish on certain spots, certain lakes in 10 feet, 12 feet on a jig worm or a Ned. So that was key for sure. So it looks like this coming week, we got rain coming in. We got some scattered opportunities for rain this week, some more warm weather. I would expect that this bite stays very consistent and you should be able to get some bass. Now for the panfish, we fish these fish on weed lines, and I'm talking shallow weed lines. We weren't out in 20 feet. We were in 6 to 10 feet of water and looking for schools of fish and fan casting with bobbers. We caught all of our crappies, bluegills, and perch on Friday up on East and West Rush, fan casting with bobbers. And then when we find them, we'd spot lock, and they didn't move far. They were relating to the weeds. They were in the weeds. We were snagging weeds with our setups. We were using drop TEG 32nd ounce jigs, about 3-4 feet down from a rocket bobber, and we were mimicking minnows. And it was actually comical. We had to use something that looked like a pin minnow, a 1 or 1.5 inch minnow. If we put on a white and pink tube, we didn't get bite. If we put on a chartreuse minnow, we didn't get bit. I'm being dead serious. It was actually laughable. You put on a natural color looking minnow, a little fathead looking minnow, or a crappie looking minnow, or the bluish shiner pattern minnow, we got bit. That's what they were feeding on, the bluegills, the crappies, and the big perch. So that was the name of the game. Just get out there, chase down some fish, have some fun. That's what it's gonna be like this week. Hydrate, wear your shirts, have some fun, be safe. Set the hooks for me. July is wrapping up. The next time I come at you, it'll be August. Have fun out there.